Life is not only black and white. Somewhere in the grey lies the truth, where perspectives collide and stories connect. Welcome to the Black, White and Grey podcast. Let's get it, guys.
Yeah, so I think we're diving in the deep end this week. We thought about this topic, and it's going to be a little unstructured because I think it's going to be quite raw, but we decided to kind of go with it. And probably the place to start is we're going to talk about grief for a number of reasons, but I think we'll start that, Michael, you were at a funeral last week, so I'm guessing it's still pretty fresh for you, but did that make you reflect differently on how you feel about the topic or kind of what it means to you? I mean, a funeral is a funeral, right? But
for me, a funeral is a funeral. I think my first death was probably 16, 17 years old. So funerals now are just more, and I was saying this to Anna actually, they're a celebration of life as opposed to mourning someone's death and that they're gone. So I see the joy in it now. I don't see the morbid aspects. I did say about 6 funerals ago, and I can laugh about it now, that unless it's close to me, I'm not going. Because you could end up going to a funeral more than 6 times a year, because I know so many people.
yeah.
So the idea has changed for what it is. I celebrate life.
That's interesting, isn't it? It's kind of the more social, and in some ways the richer your life is, as you say, by extension. The more
Go on.
the more you're going to have those highs and lows associated with loving people and losing people.
Yeah, I mean, like the last one was my good friend. We made music together in the mid-2000s. He's a music producer, but we shared a lot of moments and memories where you just reflect, and it was a beautiful thing. But towards, I'd say, the last 6 years, as we got older, we weren't as close as we were when we were younger in our 20s. So as later on, I didn't like him. Like, I literally just didn't like the guy. Like, straight. Like, I can only keep it real. Like, I didn't like him. And
Why? You didn't like who he became, or you didn't like who he always was?
I didn't like who he become, or because he didn't really change. I believe I changed my outlook, and I started seeing him for what I wanted him to.
But does that mean you didn't like yourself if you look back on that version of yourself that connected with him?
Reflection, potentially, because of what I was doing during that time. I probably wasn't a great, nice person that people now probably see me as.
So do you think it's more of a growth thing that you grew out of that relationship?
Yeah.
And where that one person stays stagnant in that point, you've kind of carried on going forwards.
Yeah. And I started seeing him for what he was. And I think, which was like what Ed was saying, a similar reflection to parts of my behaviour that I had at the time as well. Because we're what they would classify as road guys, where we're consistently trying to hustle our way through life to try and make things happen with no boundaries. So whoever's in the way can get it, because you're in the way of what we're trying to get to.
Sounds quite ruthless.
Almost. But again, you'd always find that, well, in my world, you'd always find that some of the individuals that are like that have got the biggest hearts as well. Because they're not doing it out of choice.
Yeah.
It's just a way of life. So to get to the goal with a lack of education as well in the process, the boundaries of hardship exist. So you've just got to go through them because you're at the bottom. So when you're at the bottom, you just go through, and with that does come a lot of death, so to speak. So you do get people who have passed and perished along the way based on some of the choices that they've made, and most of them have been health for me, as opposed to being killed by somebody. It's actually been health-related issues.
Okay.
And when you're in poverty, you get a lot of health problems because they don't know what to really do. So yeah, that was it. So back to my friend. Yeah, the last couple of years I didn't really like him. So then when I found out he had cancer, he died of cancer, it was like, is he telling the truth?
Wow.
Telling the truth. And that's because of the passage of things that were happening in our relationships during the time, so it almost became the boy who cried wolf, right? But I say that to say this. When I really reflect and think about how I was seeing that at that time, as opposed to what it was, cancer's not just an overnight thing. There was definitely something eating away at this individual through the process anyway, which then now gives me a perspective on what that behaviour was that was being reflected. It weren't actually him. He was already ridden with some sort of disease eating through his body. So he was going through his own challenges and his own problems. So now that I've got this space and time to reflect on it, it's not actually him that was the issue, it was me.
Yeah.
I was the issue. Because I didn't allow the space and time for an individual that potentially needed just love at the time, the space to be loved.
But that's something you can grieve, right? Is the inability for somebody to have lived a full life or have regrets or remorse or incompleteness. I think if somebody lives fully and they kind of close out the account, you feel like there's not too many hanging questions left, whereas I can't think of anything more tragic inherently than somebody never taking a day in their shoes, probably because the crucible was kind of formed before, as you say, that environment that they're in forces them to be a certain way, and actually with the kind of right support structures, maybe they would have been a completely different.
Guy was a genius. If you ask anybody, the music that this guy made, just musically, like sonically, production-wise, phenomenal. If you go with, he could make any genre of music. He's an MPC sample producer, but he could also play the keyboard. He's very intelligent as well. Like, he's gone to uni. He's done it all. So the behaviour that he was portraying, now that I sit down and reflect, was just to fit in. It weren't actually the individual.
Which happens a lot.
Of course.
Happens a lot.
Well, sometimes the persona is greater for people who are the most afraid of not connecting. They almost need to create more of a kind of a displaced version of themselves, because they kind of fear being seen for the sensitive, creative, intelligent person they are, because that can almost be exploited versus someone who's just tough.
Yeah. And I think the flip side of it is, because there's also another side, if you go into a spiritual realm, his time was his time, right? Yeah. So he's created all this music. When we went to the funeral, all everybody ever said was there's a catalogue of music to listen to. Now, I was one of the fortunate ones to have a few tracks that we made together during our time. So just listening to him on those tracks, I can hear all the problems. I can hear all the pain. I can hear all the joy. I can hear him and live through the music to find and connect with this individual. And I'm sure there's so much other aspects. So maybe his time was his time and everything's done for that individual, and the legacy will live on through his children as well.
I'm actually pretty interested to know. I know grief, when we discuss it, for me, culturally, is quite a sad, a really, upsetting time for families and friends. But when we discussed earlier on today, you mentioned about, Caribbeans celebrate somebody's life. Can you sort of like explain to me, if you feel that enables you to be able to deal with grief in a different manner to how I potentially will deal with grief at some point in my life? Do you feel like the way you deal with grief and how you celebrate somebody's life, rather than being sad for that particular loss of not being able to call or message that individual, or just having that person around?
Yeah, so I think, without sounding like it's just a big celebration, there is that moment, there is that moment where the loss will exist. And you will be like, because I've done it a few times, you're like, number's still in your phone book. It might be last week that you've called the person, you're like, I can't even call that. I can't even have that conversation. It might be, and again, it's different relationships with different people. That might be your go-to person when you've got problems all the time, and they're always there. They are now gone. So you do have those reflective moments where you can't do that. Now, I think one thing about, because I'm not sure about so many other cultures, with the West Indians, what we tend to have is we have a 9 night. So the 9th night after the person's died, people get together. So it's more of a community getting together to celebrate life and talk stories and work our way through it. And then we have the funeral. But if we're going through that process of the 9th night, you've already gone through the raw emotion of actually this person's gone. Now, the 9 nights are kind of weird because you almost expect that same person to walk through the door. Because they might have been at the 9 night for somebody else prior. then it's their turn. And then as the numbers dwindle, it's almost like something will always get taken away from you. So I think what's happened, I think Caribbeans, what we tend to do, we go through that mourning process, through the 9-night and the church. But after the church, when the reception's on, the drinks come out, the music's playing, and we're celebrating life. And for me, yeah, you're right. I think that is such a moment, because you connect with individuals you haven't seen for a while. You're sharing stories from different perspectives of this one individual, but you all seen it the same way or not. It's there's something beautiful about celebrating life as opposed to mourning and grieving life being sad. It's just another way.
It's quite interesting what you said, because obviously I love the idea of celebrating life, you know, in terms of, I'd love to be able to go to a funeral and be like, you know what, this person had an amazing life and they had an amazing story and they had connections to all these people. Or even if they didn't, you know, be able to celebrate that is an amazing thing. But then, as you mentioned, there's always still going to be that time, if that person was close to you, where no matter how much you want to celebrate their life, it's still sad, right? It's still painful, because, as you said, it might be that person that you go to in your tough times. You therefore not got a support system for them, nor do they have that support system from you anymore. You've lost that relationship. Regardless if you celebrate how great their life was or how great the relationship was, it's still very difficult, right? So it's always been a thing that, even because obviously you got I think South America, they do a similar thing with celebrate life more so than, you know, more so than grief, but at the same time it's always going to be a combination, right?
Yeah, I agree. And that's what it is. I think it's easy to look at just through the funeral perspective of you're celebrating life, but you got a whole year after of firsts. There's a first birthday to come, there's a first Christmas, there's a first anniversary or a first memory that you lot shared. There's always a first. There's the first time you go to draw for that person and they're not there no more. So there's always a first. So you've still got a process. And again, it's all about how much you allow people into your life, into your heart.
Yeah, because I feel like we set up a system. I mean, it's got to the point of absurdity now, where a crematorium, you'll have the next family peeking through the door to see if you guys are done with your half an hour slot.
Yeah.
And you kind of go,
crazy.
Does that mean that once that's finished, you go outside, you see like the smoke chimney billowing and stuff like that while you're suddenly talking to people, and you kind of think, is that my time to take forward for the next year, 2 years, 10 years, to say that, you know, we're done honouring or grieving that person? And the answer has to be, it can't be. But I think to the point you made, right, is what it seems that it's really effective in the mechanism you said about how Caribbeans celebrate, is that there are complex layers to deal with, and each one you neglect will kind of persist. So to be able to have the complexity of joy and sadness at the same time allows you to not feel guilty when you feel some joy and think, well, I shouldn't be feeling good today because I've just lost somebody. But it's like you can feel lots of different ways, and actually allowing the room for that in that kind of collective psyche, and possibly gaining that sense of community, I think just allows for a bit more of a textured relationship. Otherwise it becomes a little bit like misery harvesting, and you kind of, to keep the person alive is to speak to the next person and almost feel sorry for you that they've gone. And then when that stops, it's like, well, there's nothing else.
And I think it's all well and
Love that
good.
perspective.
It's all well and good us talking about it, like, or me personally talking about it like it's a group thing, but it's individual.
Yeah.
The emotion's individual. How you react is individual. How you feel is individual. I don't know what a next person might feel through that process, do you know what I mean? But for me, I always see the beauty in life as opposed to the horrible part of what anybody, because really, we connected. So once we've connected for a reason. So we're sharing energy.
Yeah.
And whatever that is to be, however long it lasts, that was it. It's almost like losing a loved one, like a girlfriend or a partner. Like, once it's done, you still have to mourn the process anyway. So however that is for you, the individual, that's how it is. I don't think we can actually control that. But for me, I'll always see the beauty in it, because there was a reason why we all connected. And that's just my positive outlook, and probably my coping mechanism as well in the process.
Yeah, I think that seems obvious that it is all going to be couched in coping mechanisms. You suddenly are not privy to information that this person has who's passed about what happens after you die, right? They've gone, they have the answer to that question, and it could be nothingness for eternity. But you still standing here have to kind of cope with the idea that they're in a place that you no longer relate to. But as you say, I think being able to be honest enough to admit that there were moments in time and they existed, but they didn't. You weren't necessarily promised a whole like Renaissance period where suddenly you guys started making music in your 60s. You know, you got to check reality and remind yourself, yeah, maybe the best of it had already taken place.
And that's where that whole line, tomorrow's not promised, comes in, and just live, right? So
Yeah.
that's where that ideology all comes from.
Can I ask a question? Is anyone in this room religious?
I believe in God. Yeah, I don't think I'm religious as I'm supposed to be, but yeah.
Spiritual?
No.
I'm a spiritualist.
I'm more spiritual. I don't necessarily agree with religion. Well,
Yeah.
It's quite a bold thing to say on a
That's
podcast.
No,
very,
so-
bold,
no,
But yeah.
very bold thing to say.
But no,
You have questions.
He didn't mean it.
But I think religion's an interesting thing in terms of, I think there's a reason for it at one point in society, and there's,
It's a good operating system for sure.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
it's a good operating system.
you know, and it gives people, it's essentially hierarchy at some point and control. And, you know, if religion wasn't there at some point in life,
yeah.
then there would be less reasons for people to not commit sin, for example, right? Because they had no consequence, so it brought in consequence to a certain extent. But anyway, completely different topic. But more so, where I was going with this is, with people that believe in afterlife, do you think that makes grieving death easier because they believe that they've gone somewhere better, or worse, depending on that person, you know? But like, because there's something next. So, for example, I'm technically Taoist, right? But as in family-wise, this is what we are, which is like Chinese Buddhism, and that's more belief in like reincarnation.
Mm-hmm.
And if I've got that completely wrong, it's because I'm not that religious. But in terms of the idea of reincarnation, it's, you know, depending on how you've lived, you'd come back and essentially try again, right? So therefore, grief at that point, in terms of passing, don't get me wrong, again, it's still hard, but then you believe that that person's got another chance to live at some point, right? It's not that the soul lives on, essentially. So then, obviously...
Yeah, are we able to kind of tell ourselves that they're in a better place?
Exactly.
And they're able to see themselves going to a better place. I mean, yeah, I've thought about that this week, right? As in, like, we connected and sort of spoke a bit, and the context for that was simultaneously the last 2.5 weeks we had the birth of my daughter,
Yeah.
and then 10 days later my dad passed, and he had a long battle with Parkinson's. I think the circumstances under which he went were still shocking in terms of he had a heart attack out of nowhere, and that's not how we expected him to go. We thought it would be the wheelchair, the kind of dementia, and just a smooth but sort of ultimately pretty bitter.
But then the flip side of that is, could that be more pain?
This is it,
Yeah.
and the answer is 100%.
Yeah.
So the story that comes out, and where a lot of the sort of collective sympathy, I think, that's come out is he's in a better place. Not because it's a spiritual place, but literally because the material body he was in was becoming an uncomfortable place to be. And I've gone through my sort of processing of that information of, you know, as you say, for the person who goes, I think whether it's a good place, a bad place, or a different place, it probably towards the end of your life, you've accumulated enough scar tissue that you could get on board with the idea that it would be better. I wasn't in a place for the first few days where people going, he's better now, he's not in pain, where I could separate out my need for missing somebody from the kind of embracing of that fact. And yeah, it's a complicated one, because there was some humour in a way. Like, I saw him shortly after he'd passed, and, you know, as with a dead body, it's very still, and he hadn't been still for 15 years. He'd had a tremor, which never stopped. You know, eating away at him. It starts with one hand, two hands. His legs were going, and he'd tremor like this. And I thought, you know, well, fuck you, Parkinson's. You can't do anything with a dead body, can you? He's finally got one over you in this really sort of strange, twisted manner. But I just thought that's the first time I've seen you still in years. But you know, he was an engineer. I don't think he was spiritual, but like there was a sense that he's in a better place, irrespective of my belief system.
Irrespective of belief system, yeah.
So I think it can generalize, and I think it's really important that another thing that accumulated to me was, it's losing a parent, and I'm sure I didn't really know what it was about until I've been through it, and it is life-changing, just like having a kid's life-changing, is I assume you're going to miss them till the day that you die. And when you lose the other parent, you're going to miss them till the day you die, and then maybe an older sibling. And so I really feel that whether you believe in an afterlife or any kind of life, by the time you've got to the end of your life, you're missing a lot of people. And so even if you don't know where they've gone, there's sort of a comfort in, like I sort of found myself saying, oh, I could be like 45 years, so I get to go to that place where my dad is. That feels like a long time. But I don't know what that is. That could just be a box of dirt in the earth, right? But it's like a conceptual, like liminal space that you don't really understand, but you sort of can still feel comfort from, even if it weren't true. Is my view on it.
Yeah, it's a weird one. I think, so back to both points, I think spirit, like religion itself, I think most people misconstrue how the book's read. So the messaging in the book, what people are receiving, is potentially incorrect. And,
absolutely.
And transformed in a way to control man.
Yeah.
Because majority of religions, if not all of them, all stem and go to the same root cause of a creator.
Correct.
So they all stem from one source and then are funneled out based on the constructs of the religion. So the whole idea of the belief system and having the afterlife, however that is, again, life might not be a bunch of humans in heaven or hell, wherever they go. It might just be spiritual and energy sources connecting, right? And if you believe in energy, then you would also identify that we are all source energy. So that will go with your point. And that thought and feeling that you was having could have been your father's energy just comforting you.
Yeah.
But you're thinking it's your mind making those decisions. So again, none of us really know how it works.
Of course.
But you could do some crazy gymnastics, right? Isn't like, I remember seeing down the business end of my child being born. If you were going down a birth canal, you would have no idea where you've come from and where you're going to. You literally, there's no way. And then you'd emerge out in the world and you go, did not bank on that. And then I thought, you could play that trick. If we were into a sort of spiritual inclination, you couldn't play that trick on a sentient human being. There's no birth canal. There's no replaying the same hand. But if there were to be some kind of spiritual chicanery or something, you could be being birthed and some kind of conceptual genesis into a fourth dimension, a whatever dimension.
Whatever it may be.
And it could be through the actual belief that you're dying. And then who knows? You're right. Like if you kind of want to go down that thing, you could go, you wouldn't know where you were going. And that's the whole point. The same way a newborn wouldn't know where they were going.
That is the crazy part. And the thing is, my mind's mad like that, because I sit down and think about, what was that? Like when they were dying, that moment, what was that moment in it? What did that look like?
Wasn't that the whole sort of flooding with DMT discussion, that your pineal gland's meant to dump a load of DMT, which is why you kind of go to the white light and have these sort of super hallucinogenic experiences.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like, that's what they tell us.
Yeah.
But we don't know.
No.
You don't know.
It's only the ones that have died that know that moment, but then how do we talk to them about
You know what pisses me off is my dad he was an engineer. He's like the most pragmatic person I know. My mum's an artist. She's fully off the reservation, and that's a fun thing. But everything was couched in reality. And so of all the people I want to hear come back and tell me exactly what it is, it would be him, because he wouldn't put any bells or whistles on it. He would go, it's this, or it's nothing. And yet you're right, like you can't, it's an irretrievable answer. Yeah,
it'd either be like, I told you, or holy shit, look, I was, exactly.
Yeah.
Sorry, excuse language.
No, grief is mad. It is mad. But again, it will always, one thing I will say, it takes something away from you.
Yeah.
It takes something away. I don't know what it is, but something gets taken away, and you just chip away at just being something else.
You can't be this. You can't. That's the one thing I've reasoned in quite quickly. I tried to get to a point of maybe I'm lucky in some ways, because I think that having a child, some people still go, oh, I wish I could be how I was before I had it. When can I get my life back? And the easiest way to get through the newborn phase is to say, those days are done. It's now. You can rebuild those things back in, but it's got to be done from ground zero, build it up again. And so to have another twist, it's almost brought me into that mind space. If there can be no before time, I can't wish for a time before, because it's so hard to get back to that point. And I found that I've had to be quite disciplined in not making up imaginary scenarios of what isn't the case. You know, I spoke to a good mate of mine, and he'd said he sat down with his dad and kind of got the audio recorder out and said, I wanted him to talk about his life and kind of and he said, I did that. And weirdly, I didn't even really get that out of him. I kind of put the recorder down, asked him a bunch of questions, and he sort of shelled up and was typically kind of father-like and awkward. And so I can't make up a load of scenarios where I'd have had this magical conversation with him where we put all the sort of final questions to rest and stuff, because I'm lying to myself. That probably wouldn't have happened.
I agree. And that's the thing. Like, even when you was saying what you're saying, I was thinking, I don't get why people do that. Like, try and find something that they didn't want when they were alive, when the other person was alive. For me, it's just like, there's something. If you want your answers, go and get them.
Well, you had a really good point earlier that we touched on.
Yeah.
Which is, you said some people spoke to you about somebody who was yet to pass.
Yeah.
And
yes. Yeah. Fuck, you know. Yeah, so I got 2 phone calls this week. Yeah, you weren't in the room. I got 2 phone calls this week from 2 different individuals. It's 2 totally different situations where one of them, their parent was really ill, and they were like, the person might die.
Okay.
And then they were crying on the phone. And I'm like, and? Is that person still alive? Fuck you crying for? Person's still alive. Celebrate life while they're alive, and go there and spread your positive energy, because they might need it. They're not gone. So the whole idea of mourning a person before it's happened is crazy to me. It's crazy to me.
Yeah, get down there. Literally get down there.
Just get
Spend
down
every
there.
last minute with them.
Why are you talking to me for? Get down there.
Yeah, no.
Because when they're gone, as we were saying earlier, there is no second chance. There is no phone call.
No.
There's no questions and answers. It's done. So stop crying. Forget about that. Save that for after.
Yeah. Go on, Brendan.
No, I see your point. I do. But then there was a scary time maybe a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, when my dad had some real horrible liver problems. He had jaundice and stuff. They didn't know what's wrong with him. Yeah. And they said, it's either kidney stones or pancreatic cancer. And I was like, rah, what do you mean?
Which one is it?
Yeah, which one is it? Like,
is it a grey area?
One he'll piss out, and
one he won't be back
Yeah,
from.
Exactly. And I was like, what? So obviously when I found out that, I was like, okay, well, let's be positive. So I didn't, no tears. I was just like, okay,
yeah,
it's fine. Dad, we'll get through this. And then he went for a thing. They were like, yeah, we didn't find any kidney stones. And I was like, See, then I was like, it took me some time. I didn't cry straight away or anything, but like it took time, and I was like, oh, my dad could really have pancreatic cancer. It kicked in.
Yeah.
And I was like, and he had a colleague quite a few years back. Oh God, I must have been a teenager, and he had pancreatic cancer. He died within 3 months.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And instantly I thought, God.
So you went to that reference.
Yeah, and I instantly started mourning. I was sad, right? I was like, shit.
Yeah.
I couldn't work properly. I had to go, like, in the middle of my work day, I literally had to go sit in my car.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't do anything.
Had to process.
Yeah, I was out of it, you know? So, like, I see your point in terms of...
So the question is, why? Why was you out of it? Why did you feel that way? Why do you feel...
For me, it was probably a level of... I don't know if I'll go as far as guilt, but it's like, you start thinking of what happens next.
Yes.
Like, my dad would never have then been able to see me marry or have kids, or like, at the time I was really focused on my music, and I was like, he's always pushed me on my music. My family's all pushed me on my music, and I was like, and again, back then that was my pure focus. I was like, what if he never sees, what if I'm famous one day, I play a concert, he's never going to get to see that.
But what if you did, right? As in, he may see you at your height and then have gone then as well. And the moment was always going to be. You just don't like. You will never want to lose your dad, right?
Of course.
And I think
That's ultimately it, though.
yeah,
Yeah.
The time could be at your peak, and it's like, well, why is this peak moment being robbed from me?
From me.
But I think you're completely right to like lean into. You've got to protect yourself because you're the one who's going to still be living potentially. They're the one who's. But it's interesting because how you protect yourself versus how you lean in and how you do the accounting for how many scars you accumulate is difficult. But the one thing I know, and this is something I've only realised by the kind of ridiculous contrast is, some people go, the maths isn't as bad as this, but they kind of go, well, there's a new arrival here. Do you know what I mean? +1 -1.
Enjoy that one, yeah?
And it's like there's no part of a 2-week-old baby which replaces the role of my dad.
Yeah.
And I would have done anything. Like if I could empty my bank account so that those two could have met and spent some time together, and I could have that memory.
How about that? Do you know
Yeah,
what I mean? As a memory, yeah.
I would have loved that, or to hear his voice again. But the one thing I realise is, I can now appreciate my daughter's never going to be around to comfort me. I don't want her there to comfort my loss.
No.
And so you living your life and giving it all to music, and let's say you go, shit, maybe I was too involved in it and didn't spend enough time with you. All I know is that a parent will look at you going, that's what I wanted. I wanted you to live life fully. You didn't need to comfort me. I had my parents for that. And so there's like and as a kid to a child, we want a kid to a parent. We can look at them as these people that insulate the hardship of the world and comfort us. But all I know is that actually in the small window I've had of being a parent, they don't look at you that way. You just want your kids to be okay without you. And you're kind of, it's maybe like a biological imperative where you know you'll be able, you're setting up so you can let go of them.
And I always say this, adults are children growing up anyway.
Yeah.
So we are one of a kind. So you're always going to have, like I said, the trigger emotion. It's not don't have it when I'm saying what I'm saying. It's get over it.
No, absolutely.
Minimize that.
And I did very quickly. And I was like, you know what? Why am I? I was like, my dad's still here. It could be nothing still. And luckily, lucky or unluckily, we have no idea what it was. And
Sorry,
so
and that's still there.
yeah, and then the
There you
next year he had another liver problem. He was in hospital for days, right? And he was bloated. He looked like he was pregnant. Poor.
Yeah.
And then doctors was like, yeah, we're dismissing him. I was like, yeah, but he's still bad. And they're like, yeah, we don't know what it is. It's probably hepe from like food he's eaten abroad. And I was like, unlikely.
Probably.
Well, yeah, possibly.
Do you know what I mean? Probably.
And then they went home. They're like, yeah, it wasn't. They're like, the test came back negative. It wasn't hepatitis of any sort. I was like, so he's just gone home and you have no idea what was it.
So what's the answer?
Yeah, and they're like, but obviously right now the go-to is, it's probably some form of COVID. And I was like, shut up. Come on, man. It wasn't.
Yeah.
But again, so like, but yeah, I got to the point where I was like, why am I, because I didn't let my dad see me cry or anything. I was like, God, stay
Yeah,
strong.
fair,
'Cause
yeah.
He doesn't want to see that. Because again, I'm not mourning a man that's still here.
Yeah.
You know, so like, I was like, just stay strong, be positive, and be that support system.
I suppose it's that, just those last words give it kind of more clarity. When you're upset or feeling emotionally charged like that, it's more so, it's not mourning. You're not mourning the person.
No.
Dying. You're just processing and you're sad that person's going through what they're going through.
Exactly.
Or is it a selfish thought? Are we having a selfish thought at that where you're like, what am I losing?
It's probably both. Like, if everyone's honest with themselves, there's definitely a level of selfishness where I'm like, oh, that's me losing something, not
their pain.
not him. Yeah, not him.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course, because
True.
I'm losing some level of relationship and support system, right? And that obviously can be, it is selfish, but it's also the loss that he would have to lose the relationships. But again, he wouldn't have to live through that,
Yeah,
right?
that's my point, and
we would.
that's why I say get over it, because it's selfish. And for me, like whoever that person is, if they're going through it, through the illness or whatever the challenge is for them, what are you doing sitting down saying or feeling sorry for yourself through that process? Like,
Exactly.
what are you doing?
No, I do agree with that, which is why, like,
But you turned up for him, right? As in, like, to Michael's point about giving energy, you configured yourself in such a way you could keep giving that energy back to him, which is
I was in hospital every day with him. Like,
yeah,
to make
which
sure he was
to
okay.
me that is like
I'll work from the hospital. I'd make sure that he was looked after and he was
That's
fine.
it.
You know,
Yeah.
and that felt, again, I wasn't grieving mourning. I wasn't even necessarily sad. I was just there, present. You
You
know,
was doing what you just doing.
You're exactly,
doing.
you know, what I had to or wanted and said has to do.
And you probably found comfort within that process for yourself too.
Of course.
And I
I
think
mean,
that's key.
people are something though. The one thing I know about them is they find the 20 minutes you're not there to die. they find a way. I don't know how. It doesn't matter how effed up they are, or whatever. I remember with my dad actually in Nimbin. We were sat by my granddad's deathbed, whatever you want to call it. But he'd been given the sort of 2-week klaxon for cancer, and you're done. And we were there every single day. We had nothing else to do in Nimbin. I can assure you, it's like a tiny town in Australia. And we were just doing a rota. We were like shift work here, and it was the one time everybody just went back for like 3 hours of sleep, and he just found that 2-hour moment and he went.
Same thing happened to my gran actually.
Yeah,
The same thing happened to my gran, but even with my gran, this was 2019, which was mad because she was down south. We got the call. I live in North. We got the call at about 11 o'clock on a Sunday. And then I had to drive down to my mum's, picked up my mum, right, we're going. Got my mum, drove all the way down to South London in half an hour. Don't tell no one. But there was no traffic on the road.
Other than the whole world, yeah.
There was no traffic on the road. But we got down there and we was in the hospital. My cousins, my aunt, was all there. And we was in the hospital till, I believe, 6 in the morning. And then everyone had work in the morning and we all Peter off. So we all gone to work like we got to go. She's still here, innit? So
yeah, she's strong. She's looking good. But all the vital signs are like
she's sleeping.
yeah.
But yeah, no, she was in a coma. But the signs are saying she's still here. We can come back tomorrow. So we've all come back later. So we've all gone home. And I think by 8 o'clock, so we've gone home, just got to sleep. My aunt actually said she had a feeling that something's not right. So she went straight back to the hospital. My aunt lives down south, so she lives about 15 minutes from there. So even though everyone went home, she's the only one that went back. And when she went back, that was it. Gran died. But we've all gone home 2 hours, and 2 hours later, she's just passed away. It's just like
Was she there when your grandmother died?
yes,
She
just got there, yeah.
Okay.
But she just got there. But it goes back to your point. It's almost like so selfish, but it's not. Because what we don't
You're
really,
insane.
I think what we don't really realise is the energy that we was probably given through our conversations and our story was probably keeping her alive.
Yeah.
And once we had left, we're the selfish ones.
Or
Go for it.
had that individual held on for that long to accommodate for that? Because I do feel that people have an inherent energy to hold on if they really want to. And I don't know this because, touch wood, I'm not near death. In terms of like, I'm not going through that.
I feel like you're holding on for
Yeah, hold on for
the end of the podcast.
For the podcast.
Yeah, so it's like, I do feel like people have a lot of willpower that I think you can get superhuman ability if you really want it, right?
Oh yeah, the mind's powerful.
The mind's super powerful. So I'm saying like, there's also the point of people don't want to go in front of the people they love. So it could be the fact that your grandma was just holding on, like to put, while everyone's dead,
waiting for everyone to go.
Yeah, because they also say in the coma you still
You can
hear shit.
Yeah.
Like I don't know. Obviously, touch wood again. God damn.
Oh, even the ones that have been in comas that have come out of it. So
Yeah, they say they can hear certain
There
things or
is
they experience
evidence.
things, right? It's not the same consciousness of right here and now listening, but you hear bits and you experience things still, right? So your grandma feels your presence, your energy, if you want to go that way. And then once you guys will leave, she's like, okay, I've been able, in some sort of way, everyone's been able to see me and say goodbye.
Yeah.
And I've been able to see them and say goodbye. I'm at peace.
Yeah.
I can...
Special thing about that day though, I got to meet Nelson Mandela's great grandson. The next day, I had an interview with Nelson Mandela's grandson, and in a weird sort of way, that was soothing hearing him talk about his granddad Nelson.
Yeah.
I mean, just
At
not
the time.
any granddad. No,
Yeah,
nothing like that.
yeah. And it was just like, it was a moment. That's when it became surreal, because I was sitting in a room with like journalists all questioned, having a conversation with this guy, and he was talking about his grandfather. I've just lost my grandmum. And I had a moment with him. I looked at him and I said, my granddad today. And he said, so sorry, young man. and that was just so soothing because it almost felt like Nelson Mandela was telling me,
Yeah.
because he has the same tone. It was surreal.
Sorry, I'm rolling my eyes.
Sound like a hater. It was surreal. It was a moment. It was a moment. It was weird.
It's funny actually because I found myself in lieu of what's happened recently. You know, like I'm pretty scientific by nature, but kind of waiting on a kind of, are you still here, Dad? Is there a sign of a something where I can go, there's like an Easter egg left, but you don't know why. As you say, you're not even sure why you're looking for that moment or what it means to you. But
Easter egg, you know?
yeah, but it's just kind of like, am I going to see something that reminds me of you, out of place, or kind of, you know? But it's strange because, as you say, like I think even the most atheist person would be a fool not to question some of these things. This, as you say, the holding on, the kind of significance of certain things that come in, or the transfers of energy. Actually, maybe wonder, Anna, you mentioned about kind of cultural sorrow as you deal with grief.
Mm-hmm.
What has that been like for you in your life in terms of moments that you've had punctuated by that, and the, you know, the kind of consequences thereafter for you?
You mean as in religion?
Well, how you deal with it, how it's been for you personally speaking.
I think so. I have a family member that has a mental illness. So he's schizophrenic. So he's quite close to me. And I felt when we found out, I had to mourn him while he's still alive, because he no longer exists in a form that I've known him from. So when you mention about you can't mourn people when they're alive, and I was like, actually went through that process, because that human being that I grew up with will never be here again. And so I grew up in a Christian country, Catholic, right? So we go through mourning. For us is like we need to cry and we need to be in black for the rest of our life. Depends on which member of your family has passed away. So, but I've also been quite fortunate enough that I haven't sort of experienced death. My grandparents died, but I didn't sort of grow up with them. I didn't have that relationship with them to feel any sort of way. But funny enough, I've been preparing myself to potentially bury my parents for about 5 years. So I tend to try to predict that pain to be able to go through it. Because when I did that with my close member of family, my member, obviously I can't say who, I used to, I just couldn't go through it. So I had to pretend he's gone. Yeah. Because he was gone. Mentally he's gone. He's, you know, he talks to me, comes back sometimes, but he's not the same person. So I have to see him in the flesh, but he doesn't exist in the mind. So.
But how much of that process is for them? Is it for you?
It was for me to be able to help them. So I had to go through it to be able to rationalize and be pragmatic about it. Okay, so this is what we need to do now. And I felt like also I had to do it for my parents. So I had to do it for other members of my family so that I can be able to help them go through it, because my parents is still, you know, nothing changed for them.
Well, their parents, right? So you know what I mean? They're gonna. That's that loop. Keep turning up for my kid. Keep turning up for my kid. It's like
to my parents, it's like she, especially my mom. You know, I constantly have to remind her sometimes it's not the same person. You have to. Then we laugh about him. We laugh and we have great memories, and but we also know deep down that he no longer is the individual that we've known. But it's really weird to go out and eat with somebody and knowing that they're dead to you.
So you've had to mourn that person to then objectively take action, essentially, like...
Yeah. Which is kind of love, right? As in love is actually being able to do the best thing by somebody, and if you're too subjectively involved, perhaps you can't get the distance to do the best thing.
Exactly. So you had to go through that first in advance to then be objective about it.
Yeah.
So when the person dies, what happens then? Who are you mourning then?
Yeah, that's good.
I think I've done it. That's the bizarre.
That's why I'm saying it.
So when I do it, it will be just the fact of taking care of the funeral and helping.
It'll just be a robotic
It,
process.
yeah,
basically.
it will be just a
Checkbox. You're going
a
through
range
the
of
list.
emotion.
That's interesting, right? It's like it's
Just going through it.
grief, this big water tank with a known quantity of water of different sizes for different people, and you can choose to sort of drain it.
When you drain it.
Yeah, do you drain it up front, and then there's like no water left in the tank afterwards, or do you kind of keep it as full as possible, and then once they go, you just
Do you know that notion? Because it probably falls in line with that whole 9-night process that I'm talking about before the funeral,
yeah.
which is why I can celebrate the funeral as opposed to mourn the person, because I've probably done it through that process.
I reckon if he passed away,
Yeah.
I will be celebrating his life, and but I do miss. It's really weird to miss somebody while they're still here.
100%.
I constantly miss, because he used to be my go-person to laugh.
Your
I have
go-to.
really dark memory, good dark humour,
Yeah.
and I didn't have anyone else but him to really laugh about the stuff that you shouldn't be laughing about, right? So and that I'll constantly, I'll laugh with my brother, and I was like, but you won't get it. I wish the other person was still.
Yeah, but I'm sure somebody will
here
turn
to
up in
laugh
your life like that, though. There's always, you can always get that through, and this is what I mean about why I lean more towards the energetic side of things. If you're open for that, energetically, really, you should be able to pull that back in from somebody else, right?
Yeah.
So, and I'm sure they appear, but it's up to you if you close it before they even get that.
I think I've closed
You
it. I've
probably
closed the door.
closed it.
I did,
Yeah.
because I completely avoid the individual.
Yeah.
I don't visit. I don't do anything. Which
That is funny though.
I need to work on that.
The only thing about kind of grieving the living is sometimes it's a little bit like having a pillow over something's face that's still scrambling to get the pillow off its face, and you're kind of going, I'm trying to kind of.
This guy's analogies are amazing.
Sorry, but do you know what I mean? And then they kind of go silent for a bit. You take the pillow away, and there's like, and you're like, shit, I've got to keep doing this. So you've got to invest. But you have to keep investing energy in subduing that. And I believe, like, my brother was telling me about somebody he's spoken to in lieu of what's happened,
Yeah.
who lost a son. And,
Wow.
and it just made me realise, like, that's a different ballgame, for the reason that you're just going to look at every memory that never happened and never came to be, their 12th birthday, their 18th birthday, what uni they went to. With my dad, it was like, there's not a whole life I need to invent. And the difficulty, I guess, with grieving the living is, like, you've got to really stop yourself, like, leaning into, should I be there for their birthday? Should I make a nice, happy memory for them? Even if it's just one, I think it's, in some ways, less final and therefore actually harder.
Yeah, it is.
I think all the perspectives that we've touched on are just crazy, because really there is no right or wrong way to do it.
No.
There isn't. Yeah.
There's no rule book.
I think I could really relate to Brendan's when Brendan was talking about, you were going through an emotion, right? You didn't know how to deal with it. You went to your car, and I think you were trying to, I don't know, maybe an assumption to rationalize what you're going. What is this feeling? What is this emotion that? Were you able to ascertain?
It's tough because obviously
how to deal with it?
A bit like you, I've been very fortunate in the fact that, touch wood, I've not lost anyone super close to me.
Yeah.
Like, my great grandma passed away years when I was a kid. But if I'm being really honest, and I hope my grandma doesn't watch this, but my dog passed recently, and that was way worse.
Yeah.
Like, because obviously I've known my dog since, from like when I was 9 to when I was 20. He was old, really old dog. He lived to 19, so like, again, but that was a lot harder for me. But again, because I knew he was my dog, right before he passed, he was a bit blind and he was very deaf, and he'd go out into the garden onto the decking, because he didn't really have the legs to go all the way down to the garden anymore. So he'd take a piss, and obviously I'd take him for walks and stuff. But throughout the day, because he was quite moany as an old dog, I'd let him out. And then I said, "Simba, come back," and I saw him walk towards the edge of the decking to the garden and jump off.
Suicide mission.
Bro, I was like,
He said, "I'm not doing this no more."
I watched him and I was like,
Did he die?
no.
He thought he did.
But I watched him do it, and there's a lot of steps, and they're like hard rock concrete. I was like,
Jumped off.
he just jumped straight. He went whoop, like it was very graceful jump.
Imagine though, that might have been in his head for the last like however many years. Like, I've got to do this
amazing.
jump. Before I go, I've got to do this.
He's like, I've been eyeing up this
I
jump
know I
for
can
so
do
long.
this.
And then I'll call him Mufasa as I jump.
His name was Simba, funny enough.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so he just jumped off, and I watched him, and I was like, "You fucking idiot!" and I just hear him hit the floor, and like he's just running around the garden because he has no idea what just happened because he's blind, right?
Yeah.
So he's just like where have I just jumped into?
Yeah.
He's running around the garden. And I was scared he was hurt, right?
And he's
Yeah.
deaf, so if you call him,
Yeah, and then obviously when I went to go touch him, because he doesn't know where I'm coming from, he just sees shadows, right?
Yeah.
Because he's got cataracts and stuff. And he was just freaked out when I touched him. I was like, Simba, it's all right, I'm here, relax. Took him to the vet, and they were like, yeah, every time he comes back to the vet, we're surprised he's alive.
Oh my
Like,
God.
There's no way this dog's still going. Life expectancy is like 12 to 15, and he was 19 at the time, almost 20. And I was like, yeah. They're like, Brendan, not to be rude, but we think it's probably about time.
he's a legend.
What, so you had to put him down?
Yeah, like 2 weeks after we put him down.
What happened after 2 weeks?
Nothing. He had tumour on his bum, and like
Oh.
he was just really struggling, and he'd lost a lot of energy, right?
Yeah.
And like he would get a swollen face every now and then. It was just horrible to see him go through it.
Yeah.
But he was still like
That
fine.
thing of somebody going, they're better off
Yeah.
without
Yes.
the pain.
Exactly.
And you kind
So
of go,
like we went to the vets and they said, Brendan, they're like, people normally regret doing it too late rather than too early, because they're like, they see that person or that pet go through that horrible
Pain.
stage of
Yeah.
not being able to control their bodies, not being able to do what they want to do, not being able to enjoy anything, just laying there, right? And I was thinking, you know what? While he's still got good days left, and funny enough, the day we put him down, he was having a really good day. You know, he was fine.
I was just gonna say that. So it's
I wouldn't
for
have
me.
done it. I
For me,
couldn't.
it's crazy because do you know what I mean? It's too.
just watch this
Brendan,
jump.
Brendan was like, that's the day.
No, but it's funny because it is twofold. Like, how do we actually know, especially with pets,
I don't know what he
what
wants.
they're going through and what they actually want? He
And
might
dogs, the reason why you feel so bad for them is they've got so much dignity in old age. They're
Yeah,
still
they
there with
do.
you. They're like, don't worry, I'm
so
going to run
most of
along.
these decisions are selfish.
Yeah, well, to a certain extent, but then, as I said, the vet said, Brennan, he said they're like this tumour situation because he's bleeding from his bum all the
He
time.
had a good day.
Oh.
One day out of like, one day out of 15, 20, 30, you know.
Yeah, no.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
they were saying if the bad days are outweighing the good in
of
a
course.
significant manner, he's suffering here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he is.
And
yeah.
then I felt, is it more selfish for me to keep hold of him?
Because then it's borderline animal cruelty at that point as well.
Yeah,
Indeed. I was thinking of that.
What's worse? Am I keeping him alive for me?
Yeah, that's what I
Or
was
am I going to
thinking.
let him pass? Like, he used to whimper at night. He wasn't having a good time, poor guy. Like towards the end, and I was like,
I think they're the signs.
yeah.
I mean,
they're
the
signs, and you're
blindness,
like, you know
the
what?
deaf.
The blindness, the deaf. I wouldn't. If I was blind, deaf, he had arthritis. I was keeping him alive by like, because obviously he'd have injections for his arthritis, right? And I'm like, God, that's not. If I was that guy, would I want to be like?
I don't think I would.
But it's weird, isn't it? Because I guess unfettered, there would be, if he was just in the wild, if there was such a thing.
He would have gone ages ago.
Yeah, there would have been
Yes.
some kind of, either he would have carried on going because he doesn't have the agency to take his own life, whereas it's so strange that we have
Might
that.
drowned himself,
he would
might
have
been-
have
Yeah,
jumped into the
exactly.
pond. He said, "This is it."
True.
Didn't see the pond. Just thought,
True.
well, that looks like me. Reflection,
it
you
goes
know.
back to your point, innit? Like, he might not have had nothing to hold on for. So he just, like you said, would have just curled up somewhere near a tree and just said, see you later.
But yeah, exactly that.
And there's a recipe in the end sort of story that you touched on of like when do you decide to intervene, and it makes you realise to live a good life, have more good days than you have bad, and make sure to try and actively have good days. There was a day last week where, you know, I said to my partner that we were going to take the baby to the Tate, and I woke up that morning. I was like, I wish my eyes hadn't opened this morning. It's one of those days where you just go, I want to go straight back to bed. I don't want any part of this day. But I was like, one thing I have to realise is wherever I am in that day is going to feel like that. So we went out to the Tate and I was like, this doesn't feel great. I'm not enjoying it. But it's like, the one thing about death is like, get living. Just, even if it feels a bit weird or strange or misshapen, it's just like, you've got to.
Can I ask a question? So I've had a really not a rough day. Let me rephrase this.
Get the needle. I get to call the vet.
Yeah. No, I had a weird day like 2 days ago. Actually, I messaged Anna on that day, and I just wasn't feeling myself. I was just having like, I was like, I woke up and I was like, no, this is not it. I'm going back to sleep. And it's just really a weird one. And I was kind of sitting there like, generally life's good, right? In terms of my month itself has been okay, touch wood. But then I've had a lot of people around me that have had really rough months, right? Yourself included, Ed. I've had a friend with his grandma pass. I've had someone else grandma's passing. I've had someone else. I called him. And I was like, "Oh, hey Josh, how?" Oh, sorry, no, you're not mentioning that. I've already mentioned it. Sorry, Josh, you're in the pod now. But I was like, "Hey man, how you doing?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm just taking my granddad to the hospital. My granddad's gone straight into the hospital." And I was like, he's like, "Oh, why did you call?" I said, yeah, don't worry about it. I called him to play paddle, of all things. I was like, I was like, I said, dude, it's really irrelevant what I called you for. Don't worry about it. And I said, it's just been a lot of people around me having a really tough time, and people I care about, people I really do want to be there for. And I think, and obviously I've been super busy with my own life, and like I was working like 7 days a week. It's just been hectic. And I think on top of it, having that there, even though it's not me going through it, I'm sitting there thinking I have no right to be sad, like or being down, and in terms of like, Brendan, you're doing okay.
But you do in a way. You've got every right. Do you know what I mean? The first thing I guess is to not judge it, but also when somebody's going through something, death, birth, whatever, you don't have a lot of like existential questions. It's actually really, the cards have been dealt to you very clearly. And so you go, well, I have a choice. I can either feel bad because the cards have been dealt and I should feel bad, or it could be good. I can try and make it. And you say, I've had a good day today. Well, it's only because I was expecting to have a bad day. Whereas if you go, there's nothing wrong with me. Why don't I feel right? I think it's really valid.
It's a weird one, because obviously normally, and this is kind of why I've mentioned it, because you said you didn't want, you opened your eyes and you're like, this is not the day,
It was
but
not
then,
the day.
Yeah, and you kind of, I normally, I've had days like that, but I'm thinking, normally I'm positive enough as an individual to just snap myself out of it.
Yeah.
Like that day I did go to play paddle, and I did end up going to the gym and stuff, to just, because I know there's certain things I can do to help.
Yeah.
When I knew it was a problem was when I went to do these things, and for that hour you're doing it, you're feeling okay, and you come out of it and I was like, no, I still don't feel.
Well, then you go through it, because those are the days that I feel like I just accept it as being
That's what
that
I was going
day.
to say. It's
And
the
I just put the TV
acceptance.
on or Netflix.
Yeah, it's the acceptance.
Sometimes I try to, unless I've got something to do or I need to be there for someone else, I'm just like, no, let's postpone this to another moment because I need to deal with this
It's a
quickly.
great
Or pretend.
Yeah.
Ed says like sometimes you put a mask on and just, but that day you could have just have a day for Brendan because you need it.
And I did that, and that's kind of what I did, which is why I did this sport in the gym,
Yeah.
because I was like, I haven't been gym properly for a while because I've just not had time, and I was like, you know what, screw this. You know what, work, business, whatever it is, it can wait.
It can.
I'm gonna go do things for myself.
Yeah, straight.
And I knew, because I spoke to my business partner at the time. Well, my business partner. Still
alive,
sorry, rephrase that. My still business partner.
Yeah.
So it's my business partner. I was like, because he's obviously going through a similar kind of journey to what I am. I was kind of explaining this, like, Brendan, like, if I'm honest, it's probably just a shit day for you. Like, you've got the emotional intelligence that you're going to be fine. It's just, today's just not your day. And I know that as well, because I was like, tomorrow I'm going to be absolutely fine. It's just...
You could have just been tired mentally.
Probably,
Yeah,
realistically,
he was
it could just be the
overwhelmed and
simple things,
drained.
you know.
I think that's probably what it was. But then when you get that, when you have one level of weakness in terms of like, maybe it's physical tiredness or mental tiredness, everything else seems like such a bigger deal.
Yeah, when you're going through it, you can't see it, right? It's
Yeah.
almost like you need somebody to say, let's go back to bed.
It kind of, because I was like, why does everything feel so much worse than it normally would? Little things that wouldn't even affect me on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And so my point really of this, Ed, is like, did you manage to pull yourself out of it that day, or did you just accept that it was a rough day? Or how did you go through that?
That's a long question.
Well, I think
Thanks, Mike. Yeah.
I think
How to extend the context?
it's accepting that reference frame. Do you know what I mean? It's like you're not trying to push it to a reference frame that you don't exist in. You go, I could take myself anywhere, and I've just got to get comfortable with feeling like this for the rest of today. And then what I do may or may not work. But to be honest with you, and this sounds like a fucked up thing to say, and sorry for swearing, but I've had some of the most difficult days of my life in the last 2.5 weeks. I've also had some of the most meaningful days of my life. So I don't pity myself, because it's allowed me to connect with things that really matter and be reminded of what they are in a very stark manner. I've been able to be there for my brother and sister. They've also been able to be there for me. So we've been able to kind of connect in ways that we haven't done for a long time. So, and friends too, right? And the role that they play in how they keep us buffered against difficult, dark, complicated days. And I think a big thing is being happy to call in those favours. I've historically always tried to squirrel it away. I'm okay. I don't need help. Let me show you how stoic I can be. Da 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 da. And now it's going, actually, you know what? I've invested a long time in some of my friendships. What can I ask of them? And what does that look like? And you know, they play their role too, right? So it's just don't become isolated if you don't need to be. There are people. Test those relationships.
See, and I think on that topic of friends and how they play that role, I think that would make a great podcast.